have some fun here today. So we're going to be making Bolognese sauce. And so I'm going to go through each of the things that you would need if you want to actually recreate this. So we have carrots, we have celery. I don't have onion. I forgot it at the store. So no onion. And we have ground beef. You can use ground lamb if you want to, but ground beef is the cornerstone for what you should use here. I have San Marzano tomatoes. You can use any kind of crushed tomatoes that you like. I have 2 boxes of penne pasta, but you can use any type of pasta that you like. In fact, like linguine or fettuccine is also really good. I have a food processor, a grinder, purely just to get the vegetables small because I don't want to have to cut them myself. So I have some other things that you will need. I have so this is liquid chicken bouillon. It just makes it adds a nice saltiness, but also meatiness to the sauce that we're gonna make. Obviously salt and pepper, so I guess over there. For the spices, you don't actually need them now, but you will need them at some point. Basil, definitely basil. Parsley, oregano, that one's optional. Garlic powder, that one's very important. Okay, so those are the main things that you will need, as well as olive oil. Extra virgin is preferred. Pecorino Romano cheese, this is definitely not optional. And spring or green onions. These are kind of optional. They're not terribly important. Okay, so you can actually see on the, let's see if I can rotate this without things breaking. So you can see on the veggies here, we have a lot of dirt on them. So I'm actually gonna go wash them first. So I'm going to pan over here and I'll show you how to actually wash them. Oh, not how, but like to show you that I'm actually washing them. So what I do is I just give it a few tugs, I guess, up and down, and that's all you really need. Just to get the excess dirt off. You can't get every single piece off, that's fine. And then a few shakes right here, just to make sure that all of the excess water is off, because you actually want to have this with as little water as possible on them. Because they'll just go into when we start to fry them, they're going to release a lot of water anyway, so you're not going to want to do that. Yeah, see all this extra dirt on them. You just want to get them all off, all the dirt off as you can. The ends, those are naturally that color, so we're going to be cutting them off anyway, so don't worry about those. And again, shake to get all of do the twist to get all the excess water off. All right, so you can definitely cut these up as fine as you want by hand, but I would actually recommend that you cut them into relatively big chunks and then leave it into the food processor to actually do the work for you. So let's see, can I zoom? Is there a way to zoom? Nope. So I guess there's no way to zoom, at least on Twitch. So I should move my trash here because I'm going to be using it quite a bit. All right, so for carrots, what I would recommend that you do is to cut the ends off on both sides. And because these ends are bitter and you don't want to eat them. I mean, there are not often many things that you want to eat that are bitter. And for these ones, I don't do them all at once because they're just too large. And just cut the ends off. It doesn't really matter how close you get as long as you just get the end off. Okay, so now what I would recommend you do is not just to shove these straight into the food processor. Can you actually see? Yeah, you can see it. So just not shove them straight in because the processor can't handle things that are this large. That's what she said. So what I recommend is to cut them into roughly equal pieces of equal size, like this. And for the really thick pieces like these, to cut them up in at least one more time. The reason why you want to do this is that the big pieces just spin around in the processor. I mean, for these ones, it's not really that important because they're not that thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 carrots at once. Yeah, these little pieces aren't as important. And it doesn't even really matter because we'll see what the big pieces are anyway. And they don't have to be too fine because they're going to fall apart anyway when we cook them for several hours. They're going to fall apart anyway. So here's one thing that I recommend you don't do. You see how this is like incredibly rolly like this? Can you actually see that? Yeah, you can see that. So I recommend not cutting straight down like this unless your hand's on top, and even then don't do it. Just cut it this way. Because I need to throw that away. One of the reasons people injure themselves is when they cut really round things and then the knife tilts because it rolls, and then now they put some force on it and it cuts their hand, or even worse. So yeah, so I recommend not doing that. What I'm gonna do is, let's get a bowl out. Let's see, where's a bowl that I can use? Again, it doesn't really matter which bowl you use as long as it's just to hold them. So I'm gonna use this bowl. Can you actually see that? Yeah, you can. So let's just put the blitz on this guy. It honestly doesn't really matter how fine you get it as long as it's not like huge pieces. So if you can actually see that, so you would want pieces roughly that size. So not really much bigger, although it doesn't really matter. The whole point is just to get them relatively small so that they fall apart when you start cooking them for a long time. And it doesn't matter if you get them all out right here because we're going to add more anyway. And even when we add the celery, it's just all going to go in the same thing anyway. So I'm going to cut this up. Maybe I'll do 1 carrot this time because the processor was actually having a hard time working with those 2 at the same time. If you have a bigger food processor, then you can definitely do 2 carrots at once, but I have a small one here. Part of the life of living in an apartment. I need to put the blade back in. Where'd the blade go? Oh. So put this in, and put the blitz. You see how much is actually shaking? That's how you know that it's actually quite overloaded. Okay. Oops. It's about the same size. Now let's do the last carrot. And make sure Put the blade in, Ryan. Make sure to put the blade in. And now let's do several celery. Again, it doesn't. Celery is roughly equal thickness except at the very end, so it's not really that important to cut this up even more fine. Celery is absolutely delicious if you put it into sauces like this. Actually, I'll cut this end off because it looks like there's a lot of dirt on it, so I'm gonna toss it. That's fine. And I have no problem putting these together because they're gonna be fried at the same time anyway. It would be a giant pain to cut these as fine as I need them. Ooh, that smells so good. Yeah. I made this dish like a week ago and it just tastes absolutely amazing and smells amazing. Holy moly, this is so good. All right, so then let's do the last two. We're not gonna do the spring onions because those are a garnish at the end. So in fact, I should probably put this and the cheese at the into the fridge because I'm not gonna use them for several hours. Okay, so that's got a little bit of dirt on it. And just visually inspecting. Yeah, these look fine. So notice that when I'm cutting, I have my fingers, I don't have my fingers like this most of the time. Sometimes I do, but I try to have them tucked underneath like this so that if the knife tries to cut into me, it won't be able to because my fingers are way underneath. Except here. So you notice that my fingers are like tucked in but still pointing out. That's to get additional grip on the thing I'm trying to cut. Because if I try to do this, I don't have as good grip. But if I do this, I have much better grip and it's almost as safe. And well, definitely the safest way is to put this hand on top, but you don't have control of things that roll like this. Or at least it's good control. I probably should have cut this upside down. That probably would have been a better idea. Make sure to put the blade in. Blade in. Again, it's not that important how fine you actually get it. Man, I love the smell of celery. That's so, so good. Holy moly, that is amazing. So now all I'm doing is I'm just scraping out the last bit with my hands. Okay. It's not terribly important to get every bit because it's all going to fall apart anyway. All right, so I'm going to wash my hands. All right, so this is what we got. Now it's time to fry this sucker. So I'm gonna move you over here. Okay, so what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna have the sauce, which will eventually have all the cans of tomatoes, as well as the things we just cut up right now, into this pot. And this littler pot will have all the pasta that we're gonna make. So let's see. Okay, so lid off. So here you want to use some of the olive oil. So here's my olive oil. So a modest amount, not that much, because these are actually actually a bit more in this case, because we have quite a bit of veg right here. So it's purely for compensating for how much veg we have. Do I have a better light? No, I don't. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this guy on to like medium. So on my oven, on my stove, it goes from low to high, 2, 4, 6, 8 high. I'm going about 5 for now, and I'll adjust as needed when we need to. So I'm gonna have you, let's see if I can do this. Okay, so I'm just heating it up. It'll take a while before a few minutes before the oil starts to heat up a lot. I'm still trying to work out this tripod business. How can I safely and smoothly rotate? I don't know why this doesn't rotate. Okay, I think that's really as close as you're gonna be able to see. So it's starting to heat up quite a bit. Not ready yet. So the tool that you're definitely going to want to use here is a wooden spoon, purely because because it's easy, and you don't want to scratch up your pan with it. A wooden spoon is perfect for that, and it doesn't conduct any heat whatsoever. So a wooden spoon is definitely the way to go here. One way to actually test if your pan is hot enough is to actually take a little bit of the thing that you're going to fry, so just a little bit, and drop it in. So you can see that it starts hissing, so we're ready to go. So dump it all in. Make sure to scrape out every last bit of goodness. So I'm gonna try to work around you here. Yeah, sadly I don't have an onion, but oh well. What you should do whenever you're making this, use onion, but I don't have one. And just cut it the same way as we did before, and then dump it all in like this, just as we did here. But celery is nice. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to turn it up higher. So on my stove, just so that you're aware, on this stove, the left side is for a single burner and the right side is for a double burner. So the right side is more powerful. So just be aware if you have something like this, a stove like this, just be sure that you're not heating it too high, don't go all the way to high on either side, I don't think. But there's a lot of water that's in these, in carrots and celery for sure. So don't worry about burning things here, because it's actually not going to happen, at least with these. I'm just moving the charger from my phone to a different location. As long as you keep this moving, it's all good. And I wouldn't add any salt to this, mainly because we're going to be adding things that have a lot of salt in them anyway. Yes, so don't add it now. So this is actually going to cook down for quite a bit. Is there anything else we can do? So I'm going to put the cheese and the onions away because we don't actually need them now. And for those who don't know, all of what's coming up here is purely water vapor. It's not smoke. And in fact, if you just feel it with your hands, and then you can tell that it's water vapor. If you've ever been in a shower, it'll feel exactly like this. It is water vapor. It's not anything burning. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. You should want to get balsamic vinegar of some kind. That's purely as a garnishment at the end, in some sense, for the sauce to brighten all the flavors up, because this is going to be cooking for quite a long time. But balsamic vinegar is absolutely delicious. White or red, it doesn't actually matter. As long as you have some kind of vinegar with some flavoring. Not like raw vinegar, but balsamic is really good. I'm actually going to turn this down a little bit because I don't see any liquid at the bottom. It's actually worth cooking these slower than faster, because you want to just reduce them to a sweet texture that's soft. But you don't have to do too much in this particular case. So I'm going to be cooking these for a bit. Once we're done with this, we're going to cook our ground beef. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to empty this into the same bowl that we had earlier, and then reuse this to cook the ground meat. So I'm just sharing the stream on Twitter in various places. what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn on the vent. Although it's not that good in this at this place, mainly because so the vents are under here. So I'll actually show you. So the vents are right here, but the actual pot's right here, and the smaller burners are in the back, which I think is a bad design decision. But anyway. Hold on, I'll be right back. Yeah, as long as you keep this constantly moving, it'll not burn. Don't worry about burning. Veggies can actually take quite a bit of heat for an extended amount of time, and you're not going to burn it. And honestly, it doesn't really matter how done you make these right now. As long as they're reasonably soft, then it'll be fine. Because they're going to be cooking for hours in the sauce. It's all going to break down no matter what. Make sure to get all of the corners. Well, I guess there aren't any corners because it's a circle, but yeah. All the ones down in here in this part, yeah, they get stuck sometimes in there. So make sure to use the wooden spoon to your advantage and use the rounded part of the wooden spoon in that part to dislodge any things that are stuck. Smells awesome. So what I would recommend here is just to taste a little bit. Yeah, still crunchy, so it needs more time. Maybe a little bit more oil, because it's starting to look a little dry in there. Yeah, I would recommend being conservative with the oil. Because no one likes oily food. So. Let me experiment with my camera a bit. Oh, there we go. I was looking for a way to rotate the angle without it being jagged. And actually a lot of this water vapor is because of the oil. There's quite a bit of water in olive oil already. So this could actually just be coming from the oil itself. It's not necessarily from the veggies, although there is a lot of water in them. So funny. I'm always amazed that, like, after the thousands of years of advancements in cooking technology, that the main one of the best tools in the kitchen is literally just a piece of wood, and it's shaped a certain way. That's actually quite amazing, but it's so versatile. It can do so many things for you. All right, let's test again. Okay, that's pretty soft. It's like al dente, so it's there's some crunch to it, but I can definitely feel that it's soft. So I'm gonna turn the stove off, and I'm going to find my kitchen gloves, and hopefully, without hurting myself, take this out. So it's purely just scraping out all of this goodness. I know the vent is on. Let's see. Just get everything out that you can, although it's not terribly important because it's all coming back in here anyway. And there's plenty of water in the meat that's to come in there. So it's not really a big deal. Okay, so time for the meat. Let's play with my camera a little bit more. So I'm gonna turn the vent off so you can actually hear me. Okay, so this is just a 3 pounds of ground meat. You can actually use ground lamb, which is really nice, but ground meat is a perfectly usable product. So I'm just gonna open it, put a little bit of oil in, not a lot, because there's quite a lot of fat in ground meat. Well, meat in general. Actually, probably put too much in, but it's not that big of a deal. All right, so let's try to get you a little closer. All right, so I'm gonna open this and just put it straight in. If I can open it, that's an important step. All right, so straight in. No rhyme or reason to it. Oops. Did it a little hard. Okay, so meat, wooden spoon. Wooden spoon, meat. So here, the most important thing, I should turn it on. I'm gonna turn it on medium high. So most important thing when you're doing this is to mash and scrape as you go. By that I mean there's going to be some brown bits on the underside here. Just scrape them off until the meat basically just falls apart, which is exactly what you want. So you can see some of these brown bits right here. Maybe I'll turn it down a bit. Actually, maybe a little more. So this is like medium-ish. heat. There's so much water in this, there's no possibility of it burning. And you don't want little meatballs in your finished sauce. I guess unless you want meatballs, but most people probably don't when you're making Bolognese sauce. So see all this? Just scrape it off. Scrape, 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 scrape the whole thing off. What you should want to do here at some point when you're making the meat here, whenever you have a break, is to get some kind of glass of water or cooking wine, not sweet cooking wine, so that when we need to deglaze the pan, then we're all ready to do that. So I'm just going to get a little cup of water. And then if we need to add more, we can definitely do so. So don't put this in yet, but just have it standing by. Again, scraping. First time I did this, I froze the meat overnight, and when I tried to flip it, it was exceedingly hard to do so. So what I recommend to anyone who's watching this is to, if you're gonna freeze the meat, make sure to thaw it, either just leave it sitting out in room temperature or outside or something for a while, so that it's not exceedingly difficult. I kind of neglected to do that here, so don't do what I did. Do as I say, not as I do. Not at all hypocritical. See, like I'm having trouble lifting it because the meat is still so wide. But you see all those brown bits on the bottom? That's delicious flavor. Thank you, Maillard, for the reaction named after you. For those who don't know, the Maillard reaction is the thing that makes that gives crust to burn, like not burned, but like cooked things like meat. It makes meat actually taste good and makes all baking things taste good, all that good stuff. Thank you, Maillard. See if I can get a better angle. Oh, that's way better. See if I can, okay. Seems reasonable. See, like this whole thing is still ice cold on the inside. Don't do what I did and try to thaw your meat I would say few hours before you actually start cooking it. Although you can manage just fine with this, but it's just a good idea to cook it, to thaw it a few hours before. If you see all of this water down here, it's not actually fat, although some of it is fat. It's mostly water. So don't worry that like there's so much fat in here. It's mostly water. It's eventually going to boil off, which is exactly what we want. One thing that a lot of people don't do with their ground meat is cook it until it's basically super brown. And I definitely recommend that you cook it as long as I'm going to right here. So yeah, I would recommend doing that. While you're waiting, you probably should also open your cans of tomato sauce, which is what I'm going to do. Thankfully, I don't have to use a can opener for these, but make sure you have a can opener if you need one. San Marzano tomatoes are amazing. Well, that's what happens when you pull too hard on the can of tomatoes. So I'm probably gonna have to use my can opener for that, but I'll do that later. Looks like my family's all watching. Hi, everyone. Oops. See, that's what happens when you don't thaw your meat beforehand. Lesson 1 from Chef Doherty, thaw your meat. And that's not a euphemism. All right. Let me open that third can. Can openers are, every one that I've ever used is friggin' awful. And this one is no exception. If you need to get a can opener, get an automated one. Don't get one that you have to do by hand, like I do. Actually, I'm not even sure if this can will open now. Shoot. Let's try this. Oh, that might work. Okay, so I'm using just a butter knife to open it because there's a small gap in the lid. You don't need the lid all the way off, but enough off. Brad's absolutely right. Haha, I conquered it. Alright. So I probably should be flipping this guy. Oops. Yeah, a lot of people say that a meat that looks like this is actually burned. It's not actually burned. It's not even cooked enough. So whenever you see dark brown on the surface of the meat, so this is like normal brown. If you see dark brown, that's when things are starting to get good. So this is not nearly cooked enough. Yes, and you can actually see. Look at all that liquid still down in there. Most of that's going to be evaporated anyway. Think of making bolognese, good bolognese, as like a marathon and not like a sprint. You don't want to have to work fast. Most cooking, you shouldn't have to work fast or anything like that. If you're cooking just for yourself or for your family or something, don't worry about like getting things out super precise or perfect or looking nice. As long as it actually tastes good, that's the only thing that truly matters. And also cooking is one of the most sensual things that you can do for someone. So you might as well enjoy every single bit of it. As long as I do the as long as I have some forethought in actually defrosting this sucker. Should have done that. I can almost cut through. Not quite. It's almost shaped like a heart. There we go. Your kitchen is so nice. I'm not sure if you know that though. Have you seen my kitchen? Are you stalking me? And I see no reason at all to season this meat now because it's going to be absolutely covered in seasoning at the end anyway. See, look at all of that liquid still down in there. This needs a lot more. There's actually a massive amount of liquid in there. So yeah, be patient when making bolognese. I'm actually going to turn the heat up a bit. As long as you keep it moving, it won't actually really burn. Although you do want some, I'm not sure what you would call it, char or just an intense meaty flavor when you cook things longer than actually what this looks like. That was a sentence. And one way that you can tell that it's not done is if I pick up a piece, you can actually see some pink parts right there. For ground meat, you actually want to cook it all the way through. You don't want any pink whatsoever whenever you're cooking ground meat. For different types of meat, like a steak, that's a different story. And there's a bunch of biological reasons as to why that's the case. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to eat wonderful things. So you can actually see that I'm continuously like pushing down and scraping like this. This is to prevent any large clumps of meat, because if you don't actually get rid of them now, you won't be able to later. So absolutely do it now. See, I can start cutting these a little bit more. See if I can get a straight on angle. Gotta figure out how to work this tripod. Rotate this way. There, that's a little better. So you can actually see what I'm doing. No, I'm gonna go on this side. No, okay. I'm gonna try to work around you like this. The sound is actually gonna change once it starts actually frying in its own oil, and it will actually start to smell amazing. So that's actually another way you can tell that you're done with the ground meat. I actually don't have tomato paste. That's another thing I forgot. So make sure to get tomato paste if you're going to actually make this. Because tomato paste is absolutely amazing, although it's not as big of a deal in a long cooked sauce like this. So yeah, I see several forming meatballs, so I'm getting rid of them as good as you can. As good as I can. So you can actually still see that it's a light shade of brown. It's actually not quite done. And you see there's a bunch of liquid still pooled down there. So this needs actually quite a bit more time. But make sure to stir it often to keep it from actually burning. It's kind of funny that a lot of cooking, or at least most of it, is about boiling the water out of something, or to develop a nice crust on something. Or extract the water out of something, I should say. And one way to tell how much liquid there is to make a little trail like this and see how fast the water spills out, or the liquid. If it spills out really fast, or there's a lot like that, then you know you have more to do. But if it's actually pretty slow in coming out, then you're actually pretty close. And some people have told me that adding garlic to this, like actual garlic, not garlic powder, really helps. I've actually not actually noticed the difference when you add actual garlic versus garlic powder. And the reason is that this is a really long cooked thing, and you usually add the garlic powder at the end. You just want the taste of garlic, but you don't want the actual garlic cloves, because the allicin inside of garlic cloves, whenever you cook it for a really long time, it actually breaks down and you lose a lot of the pungency of garlic. You don't want the actual pungency, you just want the flavor of garlic. And garlic powder is way, way easier to do than to peel garlic cloves and chop them up yourself and all that stuff. So as I'm scraping right here, I'm starting to feel some bits on the bottom, so that's something you want to actually keep doing. I'm not just stirring this, I'm actually scraping off the bottom here too. Let me actually rotate this down a little bit. See, now the sound's starting to change. Now is when it's starting to get closer, I guess. See, there's a bunch of bits on the bottom and the water spills out a little slower. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn down the heat just a bit so that I don't accidentally burn it. But I still want it pretty warm in there, pretty toasty. You see that there's some bits down there. It's kind of hard to see in the camera, but there's some bits down there, and you don't want them to actually burn. Although this meat still needs more time. Although not a lot more. Where's a good piece I can show you? Okay. So this piece, you can see a little bit of darker brown spots. That's when you know that it's actually getting close. All right. Normally I would use white wine here, or I would want to scrape off the bottom, but I couldn't find white wine at my local grocery. So that's why I have the water in the cup, in the glass, to deglaze things with. So you can actually, I don't know if you can see, but the water vapor is actually quite a bit less than it was before. So that's how you can tell that most of the water has been evaporated. So you just gotta be careful. Okay, so that's looking good. So give it one final stir, and in goes the liquid. Oops, accidentally. I can't pour apparently. So now this is the only part where you have to work a little bit fast, and you just scrape everything off the bottom. Scrape and just gnawing on the bottom with the wooden spoon. So now is when you would want to make sure that you have your tomato cans or whatever tomato product you're adding ready. It doesn't have to be super quick, but this was the only quick step that you had to do. So what I'm gonna do, the way I do it, is I put the veggies in and then the tomatoes. But it honestly doesn't matter since they're all gonna be cooking for hours anyway. So it's not honestly a big deal. God, it's so good. It smells so good in here. Wow. All right. So, can number uno, just dump everything in. Throw the can away, you'll never need it. Can numero dos. And those actually whole tomatoes in there, you're going to want to actually break those up. At some point, you don't have to do it now, but you want to break it up at some point. Okay, so now for the quote-unquote money shot. There's actually quite a bit of fat in there, so we're going to actually need to strain that in some way. So just stir this around. There's no reason to add any particular flavors right now or any spices because this is going to cook for several hours. What I would recommend is to cook this for roughly 2 or 3 hours and stir every 15-20 minutes or so. Or if you're lazy like me, do every half hour. What veggies I put in? So I put in carrots, celery, but I don't have an onion. I forgot to get an onion. And another thing that you should add is tomato paste. But I don't have any tomato paste because I forgot that too. So number one rule of this, always have a shopping list, a grocery list, and stick to it. See how I'm actually breaking up the big tomato pieces. Yeah, so the ends of the tomatoes are the hard pits sometimes. But it's all going to break apart anyway. So here's one of the reasons why you want to use only a little bit of oil. So look at all the oil that's still behind from the veggies, and look at all the oil that's in here. So it should be like red-brown, but you see some orange bits here. That's because I put too much oil in. So don't be like me, put less oil in. So this actually is looking relatively good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop the stream and then start it in roughly 2 hours or so. So if you're actually making this, stir it every 15, 20-ish minutes. It doesn't really matter. And keep the heat either right where it is or slightly under what it is because it's going to be cooking for a long time. So what else can I say? And if it starts to look like there's not a lot of liquid left, although that's probably not going to happen, leave it uncovered. I'm actually going to leave it uncovered for this reason, but because it seems like there's a bit more liquid than the last time I made it. But yeah, so I would just leave it uncovered and then check every 15-20 minutes. In fact, I'm going to set an alarm to do so. Okay, so I'll see you all back in roughly 2 hours, or at least I'll start the stream in 2 hours. So after around an hour and a half or so, this is starting to look a lot better. So at this point, I'm going to say that we are about half an hour to an hour out from having this completely done. So this is when I would put in my spices. So my spices that I'm going to use are, well, it's not all spices, but we have, God, I can't think. So it's liquid chicken bouillon. So this is, adds some depth of flavor and it's really salty. So we'll actually go easy on the salt for now because we can always adjust later. So basil, parsley, oregano, garlic powder, and actually some balsamic vinegar, although it doesn't really matter when you add this as long as the sauce is hot, which it clearly is, you can see. So I actually had to turn the heat down here because it was starting to boil a little too fast. All right, so let's actually get this, put you in the tripod. So I'm going to add some basil. A lot of basil is really, 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 really good in this. Basil's fantastic in this. Don't be afraid to add a lot of basil. And a lot of parsley too, which is what I'm adding here. Lots of parsley. Nothing wrong with parsley. Oregano, a little bit less of oregano, but it's still really, 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 really good. And lots of garlic powder. We can always add more, but you're gonna need a lot for something this big. That's fantastic smell. Okay. And then one last, we gotta do the bouillon and the balsamic. So I would say like a heaped teaspoon or something, roughly. It doesn't really matter exactly how much you put, as long as you put some amount in. Okay. And some balsamic. This thing's a pain in the butt to open. Come on, work with me. Some people put this at the end too. I do that when I have to reheat it, but for when you are just eating it right after you cook it, there's no need. Only when you need to reheat it, this is really necessary. Then stir. So I'm gonna taste it for seasoning. That's what you should always be doing whenever possible. Not always, because there's some things you just can't taste, but whenever possible, test it and taste it, because there may be something that you need to add. It's a little hot still. Okay, it tastes fantastic, as you might expect, but it needs salt and a whole lot of pepper. So I'm going to add a few pinches of kosher. Doesn't matter what salt you use, because it's all going to break down anyway. We don't need thick pieces. Thick crystals of salt and a lot of pepper. Black pepper, of course. All right, let's give this a spin. So I'll let this go for another 30, 40 minutes or so, and then I'll test it again. And right around that point, I'm going to turn the heat off, put the pasta in, and then we'll go from there. So I'll see you then. All right, so that's looking thick with 32 C's and luscious. So good. So now I'm gonna put some pasta and I'm gonna boil it. And I'll taste for additional seasoning once this starts going. So I'm gonna this one is on, gotta get used to this. So I'm gonna put that on full boil. As hot as it goes. And you should do this every time you make pasta. Salt the bad boy. Salt that thing. Does it taste good? And one thing you should always remember is that sauces should be too strong because they're going to be diluted by the rest of the food. So what you should do is to make your sauces intentionally too salty, because the pasta, it doesn't really taste like much by itself. But with all this good stuff, it's going to taste really good. What I'm also going to do is, and what you should do is, if you're storing your cheese in the fridge, take it out of the fridge. So I'm going to take this out and just leave it on the counter, because it's a lot easier to grate when it's not super cold. So I'm just going to do that. Now, I have penne pasta, so you can pick anything you want. I'm just going to go with penne today. This one's so freaking good. Let's give it a taste. Always taste for seasoning. Especially as you're getting closer to eating time. Tastes wonderful, but I'm going to add more salt and vinegar. It needs a lot more salt because it needs to be too strong. Open this balsamic. Make sure you clean this bad boy before you actually use it with the pasta. See, I haven't cleaned it. I need to clean it. Turn this around. It smells so good. All right, what else can we do? So I have my plates in the dishwasher, but one thing you should do before you start eating, just a few minutes before, is to heat your plates up. I don't have an example plate. Or do I? I can just do this plate as an example. So, Merry Christmas, everyone. So I'm gonna show you what you should do every time before you serve a hot meal, which is to heat your plates up. And there are many ways that you can do it. This is a really easy and effective way of doing it, which is to have hot water and to run your plate under it for a few minutes. I'm not going to actually use this plate, so I'm not going to finish it, but make sure when you do this, because I've learned this the hard way, to dry off your plate. And don't let water actually pool up in here, because it actually makes the makes the dish runny. So that's definitely something you don't want to do. All right. Let's go back to our spot. What I'm actually going to do here, because I don't need this to be, this has been cooked all the way through. It doesn't need to be done. It doesn't need to be cooked anymore. And actually, if you leave this on the heat, or at least leave the stove on for this, it'll actually be too hot when you serve it. So then you would have to wait for it to cool down, and no one likes that. So what I do right before I put the pasta in is I just turn off the burner, but leave it on the heat so that the residual heat keeps it still going, but it doesn't get additional heat. And I'm not going to put the cover on because look at all the steam still coming up. So just something to keep in mind. I'm going to open the pasta so it's easy to pour in. I wonder if I can fit 2 boxes in. So I'll have the second one on standby just in case. Okay, so it's almost there. It actually doesn't need to be at a boil, but it's a good idea. It's always safe to have it be at a boil first. I know this dish just takes a long time and you gotta baby it a little bit, but it provides so much value. It's not only super good, but it can feed a lot of people for a long time because you can scale this up as much as you want to. So it doesn't have to be this small. You can make it in a giant Dutch oven if you wanted to. And you can have many, many meals for a long time. And what you do is you either store, the preferred method is to store this in the fridge, but not in a giant container like this. What you do is you store it into like a smaller container of any kind that you wish. And whenever you're coming home from work or whatever, and you don't want to cook, what you do is you take a certain amount that you want and heat some pasta up, or just boil it, and then you have, if you portion them out, the sauce ahead of time, then you can actually make an amazing meal with only a little bit of extra work beyond what the pasta is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a whole bunch of pasta and then put it directly in the sauce, and that's just as good, in my opinion. The trick, though, is that for the pasta, you need to stop cooking it right before. Okay, yeah, I'll show you the trick once I get the penne in. So we can take the lid off. So I'm gonna see how much one box is, because I've not done 2 boxes in this before. Let's do 2 boxes. Why not? YOLO. So this might be an amazing success or gigantic failure and nothing in between. I actually prefer a rubber version of I don't even know what this tool's called. I prefer a rubber version of this because this can easily scratch your pan, and no one likes to scratch pan. I usually turn down the heat for this burner because after a while it'll start trying to bubble over. What you usually should go for is like 3/4 power to make sure that it's still boiling but not actually spilling over. And because there's so much pasta in here now, what you should do is keep this continually moving. I don't have a larger pot for this, sadly. If I did have a larger pot, I definitely would use it, but I don't. So, one thing that people ask me is, not the word so they ask me how long pasta should be cooked for, and whether you should follow what the package actually says. I actually recommend don't doing that. I don't even look at the packaging because it's just not relevant. What you should do is, it tells you somewhere where the pasta is, but everyone likes their pasta different. So I personally like it a little al dente. So one thing to keep in mind is that whenever you pour this out into the colander, the pasta is actually going to still cook even more. So whatever you like, you should aim for a little bit more al dente than you would like. So a little bit more crunch when you bite into it than you would actually want in the final thing. Because in this particular case, we're going to be adding this directly to the sauce anyway. So that's just something to keep in mind. So you can see the bubbles starting to form right here. So the heat's just a little too high. So I'm going to turn it down. And depending on the pot, you may have to turn this way down. In this case, the pot's actually kind of small, so it responds rather quickly, comparatively. But yeah, every pot's different, of course. Actually, the one thing I like about the metal version of this is, and the rubber version does this too, but the metal one's better, is that you can actually feel for small bits of pasta, not the long noodle type pasta, but like small piece type pasta like this. Okay, maybe I should turn this down. Is that you can actually feel through this tool when the pasta's done. So I can, as I'm moving it through the pasta, I can actually feel, that the pasta's hard. It's a little harder to do with penne because penne doesn't actually bend very well, because it's such it's so short comparatively. But with longer pastas like spaghetti or fettuccine or linguine, you can feel it a lot easier. And you can actually visually see that the pasta's done when it actually can bend a lot easier versus when if it's just a gentle bending, then you know it's not done. But the tried and tested way is just to taste it yourself. Penne usually takes like 10 or 12 minutes in general, so that means I would aim for like 8 or 9 minutes. But so I wouldn't actually set an actual time. What I would do is I would just go after a few minutes, taste it, see what it's like, and then wait like a few more minutes, taste it again, and see. I'm actually going to move this over here. So you can actually see it better. Yeah, so note that I'm keeping this on the hot burner. So, mainly just to keep it warm. But if you moved it off, it would still be fine, but I'd rather this still be hot. So just leave it on the burner, even though the burner's off. I don't know why they call it burner. The electric stoves don't actually have anything that burns. If it's a gas stove, then that makes sense. But electric stoves don't burn. At least they shouldn't. See, the bubbles are starting to form here, so I'm actually going to turn this down even more. One thing to also keep in mind, whenever you're cooking anything for that matter, is that if you have an electric stove like this one, I guess the vast majority of them, they actually power cycle. So that means that when you set it to a certain value, it's actually not set to that particular value. What it does is it goes on full power. So this is going on full power right now for a certain amount of time. And the dials are actually telling you how long that duration actually is. So if I put it at a higher setting, it would be on for a lot longer. And that matters whenever you have a pot that's actually kind of small, because that means that the heat being radiated into the pan, and so the pan's internal temperature is going to go way up and then way down a lot more, versus when you have a larger one, the heat's going to be more gradual, so it's not going to go up and down so vigorously. So again, something to keep in mind. That's why some people prefer gas stoves. In most cases, I just don't really care. It doesn't really make a huge difference, but okay, I probably should add some water to this. Since I added cold water, I'm going to up the heat a bit. Okay, this needs a heck of a lot more water. So where's the glass? This is the beauty of home cooking. It's not going to be glamorous or anything. See, we all make mistakes, but you learn from them. Okay, so this is looking nice. And you see how this water is actually kind of not clear? So the pasta water is actually really, really good at thickening a lot of sauces. But here, we don't really need to thicken this sauce. So if you do need to thicken the sauce, what I would do is when the water's like this, put it into like a glass or something, and then pour it into your sauce in order to thicken it if it seems too loose. And it's amazingly good at that because it's so starchy. But here we don't actually need to do that. So let's taste one. It's probably going to be way too al dente at this point. Oh, not that bad actually. It is a little al dente, or too al dente for me. But I love pasta. Pasta is amazing. Especially homemade pasta. Homemade pasta is also amazing. I gave away my pasta roller, but it still can be done. And there are several videos on YouTube that you can find of people making pasta without a pasta roller, although the pasta roller really helps. But the pasta directly from the box is still pretty good. I don't think this needs any more water. One thing that I swear by, even though I'm not, I don't have proof of it, is that frequent stirring of pasta like this actually makes it cook quicker because you're actually bashing it up a little bit. But I would love if someone actually was able to tell me if that really is true. If vigorous stirring of pasta and frequent actually tenderizes pasta or makes it, yeah, tenderizes pasta. That's the way to say it. All right, so let's see. How are we doing? All right, that's good. So it's a little more al dente than I like, which is good because it's going to continue cooking in the sauce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the burner. I'm going to don protection just in case, and I'm going to pour this into my colander, which is in the sink, so that we don't want all this extra water, but we do want the pasta. Oh my god, it's overflowing the colander. Quite a lot of stuff on the bottom too. If there was a way to enforce that no pasta ever sticks to the bottom when you're boiling it, I would love to know that answer. If there was a way to enforce that. So leave this off the burner. It doesn't need to be hot anymore. But I'm gonna move this here so it's center stage. So whenever you have pasta in a colander, shake it to let all the excess water out. Although that's kind of hard to do because there's a lot of pasta in here. All right, slowly, slowly, slowly. Got a lot of pasta. Look at that. Okay, hopefully this is not a complete disaster. Okay. I see that one piece. I am going to get it. Oops. The beauty of home cooking. All right. There's a lot of stuff in here. A lot of beautiful, 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 beautiful stuff. I'm gonna move you so you can see better. This is why I need a bigger pot. Oh well. What can you do? Can't win them all. Starting to get nicely integrated. This stuff is amazeballs. All right, so that was making Bolognese. Look at how beautiful that is. Look at that. And it only took like 2.5 hours or so, and most of it was unattended. And now I have meals for a few weeks. So thank you for joining us. So right after this, I'll show you what plating this looks like because my dishwasher is not completely done. So I'll see you then. Okay, I said I wasn't gonna actually use this plate, but I am because I'm hungry and I can't wait. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scoop some of my delicious awesomeness onto my plate. Holy moly. Just look at that. Look at how amazing that looks. And I didn't even do any plating techniques. I didn't change anything about it. It looks absolutely bonkers awesome. So there are three things that I typically do, which is a little bit more basil. The basil tastes amazing in this. More basil. Not a lot because we put a lot in earlier. Now it's time for the two other stars of the show, which are going to be the spring onions and the pecorino romano cheese. Has to be pecorino romano. No other cheese is good. And what I do here is I just snip them with normal scissors, the onions. It's a nice textural and taste contrast with the rest of it. And actually looks good too. So a few ones of those, and grating some cheese. So it doesn't matter which size holes on the grater that you want for this. What I do is I do the smallest ones because it kind of looks like snow, but you absolutely do not have to do this. And also, make sure that you leave this cheese out. If you refrigerate it, leave it out so that it's a lot easier to grate. Lost my train of thought. And if you want to be really fancy, final thing that you can do is drizzle some raw olive oil on the side. Like that. I think that's good. Isn't that awesome? Thank you for joining. I'll see you next time.